Good evening, everyone. Welcome to those who are here.
Good day, everyone. I think we should take a hold on until 5 to announce this class starting or whatever. This is still 4:56, so there's a little time. I don't know if you guys can hear me, but I think we should hold till 5 about that. Thank you.
Yes, we can hear you, Edie.
You said what? I didn't get you.
No, I said we can hear you, Edie.
So I don't know why the announcements are coming before 5.
Hi, Charlie. Please, can you make Uchechi co-host so she could unmute when it's time? Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ini Apan, and I'll be moderating tonight's session. Gentle reminder to please Get your notepad ready. Invite your colleagues who may have forgotten. And ensure your environment is noise-free so that you will be able to participate fully in the class.
Lockout. Do you still have
If you've forgotten to introduce us, to write your name in the chat, now is a good time to do that. Your name and your party. Welcome everyone. Once again, my name is Ini Apan and I'll be moderating tonight's session. By now, you know the rules of engagement, so I will go straight ahead to invite our facilitator for this evening's session. Her name is none other than Uchechi Ezemrio Yirio.
Hi, Ini, we can't hear you any longer.
Uchechi is a legal practitioner with a key focus on technology. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Is it better now? Can you hear me? Okay, forgive me. Okay, so our facilitator this evening is Uchechi Ezenyirioha. Uchechi is a legal practitioner with a key focus on technology law and regulatory compliance. She serves as a legal consultant to the foremost inter-country adoption agency in Nigeria, Life Foundation, BBC News, and the Electoral College, Nigeria. She's the head legal consultant of Zoe Legal, a corporate, commercial, and startup legal advisory firm in Lagos State. She has worked with several local and international bodies on fintech, telecommunications, employment law, and immigration. In addition to her legal practice, she is very keen on public advocacy and the education of Nigerian youth on politics and governance. She serves in the Electoral College as the Deputy Director of Lagos State. Uchechi is called to the Nigerian bar and has obtained an LLM in international commercial law from the University of Hertfordshire. She runs a podcast called Zoe Legal, where she speaks on legal issues and is keen on using her platform to encourage awareness and education among the masses. This evening, she will be teaching us on the Constitution and citizens' rights. Please welcome with me Ms. Ezemyirioha.
Thank you, Ini. Thanks for that introduction. Please, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
All right. Thank you very much. And hello to everyone. Hi, Lisa. Hi, Maureen, and all of the Electoral College front runners. Once again, it's my pleasure to be here. It's always a great thing to see the progress that we make throughout the years, and you can tell that we have a lot of dedicated people. A lot of people who do this are volunteers, and it's always encouraging to see this number of people turn up time after time. And of course, we are all joining our hands together to build a better Nigeria. And every seed planted, it's for the right cause. And education, as we all know, is one of the key elements of progress, of success, of growth, of change. So I'm very honored to be here once again. I was also a student like yourself, and it was through these courses and these teachings that I've been able to also call myself a graduate of the Electoral College. Very proudly, I wear that flag very, very high. I fly that flag very, very high. So once again, thank you so much for having me here. Ini, do you mind sharing my slide? Do you assist with that, or should I do that from my end? Can you hear
Sorry, yes, I can hear you. Sorry, I was muted. Does somebody on the admin have your slides, please?
Yes, I think I shared it with Lisa.
Ini, I've sent it. I'm sending it to you on WhatsApp.
Okay. All right. So while that's going on, just as Ini said, we'll be talking about the Nigerian Constitution and citizens' rights as it pertains to civic duties, politics, and all of that. And this is one of those topics that you'd more or less feel like, I know my rights, I know who I am as a Nigerian, I know what to expect. Well, it will be very surprising to know that a lot of people do not quite fully grasp what their rights are, even down to the basics. As a citizen of Nigeria, what applies to you, what your obligations are, what, on the basis that you're a Nigerian citizen, what sort of political rights can you hold on to, right? So I'm just going to be going through that. We're going to talk about some of the political rights that we have as Nigerians. We're going to talk about the concept of the rule of law. We're going to talk about the legal framework as well. All right, and please just let me know when you're up with the slides. Okay.
Almost done.
Okay. Okay, so while we're waiting, can anyone just, I'd like for this to be interactive. Can anyone just share with me what you understand by the concept of rights? A broad view, a general view. When you hear rights, what comes to mind? Anyone can unmute and share. How would you define rights? What comes to mind when you hear rights? Hope you guys can hear me. Or Imi, can they unmute? Okay, I
I'll
see it.
unmute you now, Farid. Hold on.
And Cynthia as well.
You may unmute now, Farid. Can you hear me,
All
Farid?
right. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, so what I understand by rights is the basic thing that every citizen has access to. So that's what I understand by rights.
Okay. Basic thing that every citizen has access to. All right, Cynthia, how about you? Yeah, I see someone in the chat. Sunday Timothy says, right is moral and legal entitlement to have or do something.
Okay, I believe that rights are privileges accorded to individuals based on status by association of some sort.
Okay, very good. Privilege accorded to an individual based on status or association. That's a good one. Jovita Membis says, a right is a moral or legal entitlement to do or have something. Rights are often protected by law, but they can also exist without legal protection. Very good. Okay, so I'll just stop there. You're all correct. But just as a very basic definition, right? A right is just something that you are entitled to, something that you can lay claim to, right? So if you say you are, or perhaps you go to school, right, and you pay your school fees, by so doing, you are entitled to an education, you are entitled to be taught, you're entitled to have access to the classroom where you then be taught, right? You're entitled to the things that your money have indeed, been paid for. So rights as a general concept is just what your entitlement is. You have an entitlement to do something or to have something, right? So just as Cynthia said, your rights also vary based on your association or where you find yourself or the group that you are in. For instance, if you're a Nigerian and you go to the US of A, the dynamics of your rights automatically changes because you are no longer within that jurisdiction as a Nigerian. If you're a Nigerian and you move from Nigeria to even a neighboring country like Ghana, the dynamics of your rights obviously will change. So having that in mind, rights is something that you're entitled to have or do. It also varies based on your jurisdiction, right? Also, some rights sort of, because you have a right, it also places an obligation or responsibility on another party. So because I have a right to education, that means that there is a governmental organization that is required to give me that education, right? If I have a right to, say, for instance, freedom of speech, right? For instance, the press, that means that if I come out to speak, someone like the police does not have any right, so to speak, to stop me from doing that. So all of this, they're all intertwined and as well, they have obligations that will naturally occur because of these rights and duties that I have. Ini, are you good? Do you have the slides? Do we wait some more?
Okay, sorry, I need to hear me, please. Check it. Almost there. I just need Chaya to make that screen host, co-host rather.
Okay, I mean, I could.
You have co-host function in it. You can share screen.
No, it's been done now. I can share now.
Okay. All right, fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, so that's the topic, the Nigerian Constitution and citizens' rights. So you can move to the next slide. Okay, so like I mentioned, we're going to be covering the general overview of rights, which we already started talking about. We're discussing the legal framework of citizens' rights in Nigeria. So in essence, where do we derive our rights from, right? Because obviously we're a democratic system of government. That means that there needs to be some sort of central framework where you can go to access what these rights are and what are the limitations of these rights. And I think someone made mention of rights being legal, right? Because they are legal, they will have boundaries where your rights stops, another person's rights starts. So we will say you have freedom of speech, right? You cannot then slander another person. You cannot then make libelous comments about another person. You cannot then make treasonable comments about the government. So the rights obviously would have boundaries, and they would also sort of have limitations as to how far you can go. You say you have the right to freedom of movement. Obviously, your movement stops where another person's rights starts. So you cannot just come into my house in the name of you have freedom of movement. So all of these things are defined within certain rule books, regulations, and all of that. So we're going to look briefly into all of those. Then obviously, because we are a political class, we're really focusing on political civic education. We're going to delve into some of these political rights that we have as Nigerians. Then we're going to have a critical look at the Nigerian Constitution and what forms the basis of each of these rights. Ini, could you go to the next slide, please? All right, fantastic. So the rule of law, right? So why I would like us to touch on the rule of law is that you cannot have a society with functional rights without the foundation of a proper rule of law. Rights, I would say, in essence, are the concepts, they are the theoretical aspects of the law. The rule of law is sort of like the vehicle, it's the practicality of these rights. You know, if you do not have a society with a functional rule of law, your rights do not really make sense, because who will enforce it? How will you seek redress? How can you lay claims to it? So for a society to properly, have a viable, justiciable human rights and all of these political rights, civil rights, they have to be protected. And like I made mention here, the rule of law is a liberty-centered constitutional concept, and it says that everything must be done according to the law. Everything must fall within the four walls of the law within that society. So you find things like equality before the law, independence of the judiciary, autonomy of the judiciary. That means that the judiciary is independent and they are free from any sort of influence by all other forms of government. We find things like separation of powers, checks and balances. No one particular arm of government is greater or more superior or more has like a a final say against the other arms of government. So there's sort of like checks and balances. One arm of government makes the laws, another one executes it, another one enforces it. So all of these concepts within the rule of law sort of acts as a vehicle that transforms or implements the human rights that we enjoy within our society. Now, there's been an uproar. I mean, it's an ongoing debate about the justiciability of some of our human rights in Nigeria. You know, say you have a right to education, can you really enforce that right? Is there really a place in the constitution where you can actually take someone to court or take the government to court because they've not provided education for, say, the rights of a child, right? So some of these aspects of the law, they are still non-justiciable. And by non-justiciable, sorry if I'm going too fast, please, you can ask your questions. If you have any questions, please just feel free to drop it on the chat. Talking about non-justiciability of some of our human rights, it's just speaking to the fact that it's not every right that is specified in the Constitution that you can necessarily seek a claim on or a redress on, right? So there's some rights that you can still like debate on whether or not you can take them to court. But actually, in recent times, we have seen that some elements of the Chapter 2 of the Constitution have actually been proven to be justiciable. And I think that's also that also speaks to the progress in our legal system. Okay, so without the rule of law, you cannot really enjoy your human rights, because the rule of law is the vehicle that protects your rights within a society. And as the stronger your rule of law, or the stronger the applicability of the rule of law within a society, the more secure the human rights of the citizens are. The rule of law is sort of like the implementation mechanism for human rights. So it turns the principle of human rights into a reality, right? It further strengthens, a person's standing as a citizen. So if you're a Nigerian, because you're a Nigerian, there are certain rights that are accorded to you just by the fact that you're a Nigerian. Someone who is, say, an American will not enjoy the same things that you enjoy. There are some laws that automatically apply to you because you are a Nigerian. So we're going to move on to the next slide. I believe that also defines what rights are. So this is a definition you can definitely use. It's broad. It also covers different principles that within concepts of rights, right? So it says rights are legal, social, or ethical principles of freedom or entitlement. The rights are fundamental normative rules about what is allowed of people or owed to people according to some legal system. And that's why I love Cynthia's definition. By virtue of your association, by virtue of your jurisdiction, by virtue of the legal system that you find yourself, there are some rights that you would have. And bear in mind that these rights are not universal. They're not always universal. I mean, we have people like the UN, we have organizations like the UN that try to sort of give conventions, produce conventions on basic human rights. For instance, the child rights, right? But still, each of these legal systems have to ratify those acts, those rights within their laws before it becomes of general practice within their laws. And still, those ratifications are also subject to the sort of legal system that is at play within the country. Case in point, the Child Rights Act. In Nigeria, the concept of the child is something that is the state has autonomy over. So you can't really say, for instance, in the North, you've not ratified some of the aspects of the Child Rights Act, so it is not enforceable there. Also, to mention about legal systems, here in Nigeria, I mean, women pretty much have most of the rights that men have. Off the top of my head, I cannot think about, the rights that men, okay, well, in the Labor Act, it differentiates between a man and a woman when it comes to working overnight or working hard labors. But I would say by and large, women sort of have broad rights. But if you go to a place like Saudi Arabia, right, women's rights are limited. I mean, you cannot go to Saudi Arabia and start saying, oh, all my rights in Nigeria must apply. You have to understand the legal system where you are. There are some countries that people still cannot vote. A place like North Korea. North Korea, it's crazy over there. And there's this Asian country as well. Is it Turkmenistan or something like that? So the rights there are still very, very stringent on their citizens. So like I said, depending on the society that you find yourself, the rights vary. Okay, so moving on to the legal framework for rights in Nigeria, we have the Constitution. The Constitution is said to be the grand norm. Grand norm is like the father of all other laws. It is from the Constitution that all other laws derive their validity, right? So if any other law is inconsistent with the Constitution in Nigeria, that law is voidable to the extent of its inconsistency. So as much as possible, laws or regulations or acts or local bylaws have to be consistent with the Constitution. So we have the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, more specifically talking about the Chapter 2, which specifically dwells on human rights within the society. We have the Electoral Act, which is the act which we should all know, as political students. We have INEC regulations and guidelines for the conduct of elections, which obviously you would have to also study in terms of when elections come up, knowing what date and time and all. For instance, the past election, we had the BVAS. Obviously, that was an amendment and an update on the INEC regulations. So all of that you would find within these regulations. We also have the international human rights obligations and regional human rights obligations. These are sort of like more wider in scope. And like I mentioned, the countries have to ratify it within their constitutional or rule books, because again, countries are autonomous, they are independent. You can't force any country to do anything. But when it comes to some basic human rights, it will probably be frowned upon. Some countries be frowned upon. They are seen not to, adhere to some of these rights and regulations. All right, we can move on to the next slide. Okay, so these are some of the international human rights instruments, and whether or not Nigeria has ratified them into its rule books. So some of them dealing with civil rights and political rights. We have the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which we have ratified. We have the Convention of the Rights of the Child, as I mentioned earlier. We have a Convention of Protection of the Rights of all migrant workers and members of their families. We have something on elimination on all forms of racial discrimination. We have optional protocol to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. That one is yet to be ratified in Nigeria. So like I mentioned, there are all of these international conventions that the UN has come up with, the AU, all of these international bodies. They're always looking for ways to have general applicability on some of these basic human rights. But then again, whether or not the country chooses to ratify it within its laws or not. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. Thank you, Ini. All right, so more specifically, let's look at civil and political rights. So this basically refers to an individual's ability to participate within the political and civil terrain within the society. And this is done without fear or intimidation or discrimination or any kind of repression whatsoever. It is right as a citizen, your status as a citizen. Your civil and political rights are very specific to you because you are a Nigerian, right? Someone who is not a Nigerian is most likely will not enjoy civil and political rights in Nigeria, except they are of some sort of they naturalized as Nigerians, or they have some special, rights which have been accorded to them by the federal government. But most of the time, it is only Nigerians that can lay claim to civil and political rights. These rights, obviously, they are a class of rights that protect individuals from freedom from infringement by governments or intimidation by social organizations and private individuals. They are not just limited to, say, the right to vote. So it's more than just your right to vote, right? You have a lot of rights as a Nigerian, a lot of political rights. You have a right to run for office as long as you're of age and you meet the requirements to participate. You have a right to do that freely, participate in political rallies, campaign, go on air, debate, all sorts of things. You have all of those rights just because you are a Nigerian. You have a right as well to join a political party. You should not be bullied, or you should not be forced into, there's something that was happening, it seemed as if everyone was woke all of a sudden, but then it started getting into that place of intimidation. Social media was being used to sort of bully some people, and that was not really a positive thing that came out of that. So yes, you have a right to participate freely in political rallies, events, and also join any political party. Civil rights include the right to ensure that your physical and mental integrity is preserved, your life, safety, protection from discrimination, such as race, gender, national origin, color, sexual orientation, religion, even, or disability. All of these rights are accorded to you. You also have a right to privacy. I mean, someone cannot force you to tell what your political affiliation is. It is your personal right. You don't have to disclose it. You don't even have to let anyone know who you voted for. It's not no one's business. The government or the constitution protects that privacy for yourself and by yourself. Your freedom of thoughts and conscience, and how you process or how you arrived at the decision to vote for who you want to vote for or to run for office. It's strictly your right? And freedom of assembly and movement. You can have your political rallies wherever you want to. But then again, remember I mentioned that your right is not boundless. It has limitations. So, for instance, you wouldn't say you have the right to assemble, and then you go and assemble on Zumbambadiwe or on Third Mainland Bridge, right? That's a public access way, and that's an infringement on another person's freedom or right as well. So definitely, whatever we do it within the confines of right or wrong. Even if you say, for instance, you want to even do political rally within your estate, right? You don't make it so noisy, or you start, causing chaos and blocking the road. That obviously infringes on another person's right. So everything has to be done within the rule of law or the bylaws within that estate. Even is to take a permission or to issue a notice. All of those things, I'm sure that each of these communities, they have their guidelines on how to do that. So definitely, whatever we do, the concept of our rights should be also, equitable, right? We should respect another person's right while we practice our rights as well. All right, so we're going to move on to political rights. So obviously, this goes further than just the right to vote. Covers the rights of the accused. So the concept that you are innocent until proven guilty, right? Sometimes when it comes to the court of public opinion, it gets tossed out people just want to crucify any accused person, but truly and rightly so, everyone is innocent until proven guilty. And when it comes to criminal cases, the burden of proof is on the one who is asserting that wrong has been meted on him. So just running through that, you have a right to a fair trial, you have a right to due process, and you also have a right to seek redress or legal remedy if something has been wrong done to you, which is something that most people actually do not fully appreciate within our society. People are not very gingered, or is that the word to say? People are not very motivated to seek legal remedy, and I sort of understand where that comes from, because again, when you look at our legal system, there's a lot of delays, a lot of timely deficiencies, and some people would also say that it's also quite expensive. So other than just going to court straight on, there are other ways that you can seek redress, which is also within the confines of law. We have mediation, AGR systems and stuff like that. So I think that we should be more aware of these things, because there are a lot cheaper and faster ways and mediums which we can seek redress when it comes to some of these whether justiciable or non-justiciable rights. Again, you have the right to assemble, the right to petition, yes, the rights of self-defense, and the rights to vote, which all falls under your political rights. Okay, so the citizens' rights as provided for in the Constitution, right? So before we delve into the Constitution, these are some of the questions that we should have in mind. Is the human rights respected in Nigeria? Would you say that human rights are respected in Nigeria? Can I even just throw that question open? Would you say that in Nigeria, your rights as a Nigerian your human rights as a Nigerian is respected broadly? Just asking a very broad question. How would you judge the respect? Someone is laughing. How will you judge the respectability of your rights as a Nigerian from 0 to 100%? 100 being very respected. You can drop it on the chat. Okay, someone said 43%. Okay, that's even higher than I thought. 30%. Okay. Wow, -2. Okay. -2. Any more takes? How would you judge the respectability of human rights in Nigeria? And now take into consideration all levels of government, judiciary, executive, legislative. By executive, you can refer to the police, because police falls under the executive. Okay, while we're still pondering on that, the next question is, does the justice system have the will to treat the issues of human rights without fear of favor? And this question speaks to your perception of the autonomy of our judicial system. Remember, I mentioned earlier that the concept of rule of law must be strong within a society in order to ensure that the rights are properly protected and the will of the people are properly respected. Would you say that our justice system has the will? Is our judiciary autonomous enough, so much that you would respect whatever comes out as a decision, within our justice system? You say that, yes or no? Another question would be, does the country, Nigeria, have the institutional framework to tackle and grapple with human rights abuses? So when you get your rights infringed upon, do we have a proper institutional framework that will properly ensure that each person's right is protected? You can seek redress, you can seek claims, you can probably bring anyone who has infringed on your rights to book. They can seek repercussion or recourse in court. And lastly, does the Nigerian government know what the human rights and tenets of democracy are. And these also speak to the fact that we should also encourage dialogue with our, our representatives. That's something that we hardly do as a society, as a people. Once you elect people into office, like they are living in another world and you are existing in another world. You can't even relate. There's no there's no middle way. There's no sort of even avenue to even come together to question them or to interact with them. There's such a divide between the elected and the ruled. So all of these questions are things that we need to have in mind while going through some of these rights that we were mentioning. So first we have the right to freedom of thought. I mean, these rights they're pretty straightforward. Right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. So I'd say this specifically because a lot of people, get criticized because of their train of thought. I mean, you respect whoever you respect, vote for whoever you want to vote for, campaign for, be in a party for whatever it's worth. But again, it is your right, it is your decision, and you also have to live with it. In the Western world, we know that political parties sort of have ideologies. So if you say you are a Republican, there's a lot that is being implied. There's a lot that is being, I can assume a lot of things about you, and rightfully so. If I say I'm a conservative, you can just say, okay, so you're pro-abortion or whatever, you're pro-life or pro-this, guns or whatever. All of those things, they're quite easy and they've sort of figured it out in the Western world. But I would say that in Nigeria, we're sort of gradually building. You find that some political parties are gradually building ideologies around, their train of thought. It's not fully formed, but then again, I would say that you as a person, your right to, whatever journey has brought you to this place of this is where I want to pitch my tent. It's your right. No one should bully you. No one should harass you. No one should intimidate you. It is your rights, your thoughts, your conscience, and your freedom is fully protected under the Nigerian Constitution. Okay, moving on to the next. Okay, so next we have rights to freedom of expression and the press. So I had mentioned earlier that you have a right to talk, you have a right to campaign, you have a right to go on the press and support whatever party you want to support, you have a right to debate, but all of this should be done within the confines of that right. So for instance, you wouldn't go and make claims, you make alleged claims that are not, factual, probably, rumor mills, all of these things which could actually damage another person's, reputation. All of this you shouldn't be having a right to freedom of expression, which I believe that everyone should be able to communicate who they're supporting and why they're supporting who they're supporting, and make a case for whoever it is that they're supporting, right? But you shouldn't cross that line of being abusive, derogatory, disrespectful, slanderous, libelous, because then again, catch a claim, be sued for either of these things. So yes, we have freedom of expression. You could even print out, make a printout, you publish articles, all of that is within the confines of your rights. But then you should also know that there is something called treasonable claims. You have to understand that there's an extent at which you can criticize the government. You cannot sort of incite an overthrow of government, because that's like an attack on the state, and the state has a right to retaliate and sort of do what they have to do. But like I said, we're a democratic state, we're a democratic country, so you can't criticize the government. If something is being done and the rule of law is not being followed, you have the right to speak on it and address it. But whether or not our government understands that right is also something that will also be questioned. Case in point, the ban on Twitter a while back, there was all of this, hula baloo about it, but then you would also have to ask yourself whether your government understands what it means to have, freedom of expression. Again, when it doesn't harm anyone, I think anyone should be able to criticize the government, rightfully so. You have a right to peaceful assembly and association. For instance, this is an association. Electoral College is an association. It's a peaceful assembly. We're educating people on what political rights are, what political parties are, what it means to join a political party, what it means to participate in government, the fourth estate, the press. So this is an association, and we have a right to do that. And some of these rights we sort of take them for granted. And sometimes it is sad because we've come a long way as a society, as a nation, to get to this place where information is accessible and people are willing to share this information. There are some societies that you cannot even be looking at definitions of what voting is or what campaigning is, because it is strictly forbidden. It is strictly forbidden to even have a phone that has internet access. I read a lot about North Korea, and it's I don't even know that anyone will be able to survive there. But there are people there. People are, they've fully been indoctrinated into such societies. So it is our right, and I think that as a Nigerian citizen, you owe it to your nation, you owe it to yourself, to your children, to get involved with all of these associations, know what is going on, put your ears to the ground, understand where people are coming from, understand the ideologies behind political parties, so that when you make your decision, the decisions are rightly formed, they are intelligently formed. You have the right of freedom of movement. You even have a right to protest, but peacefully so. You have a right to, march around public environment, but you should do that peacefully. You don't vandalize people's properties. You don't, go into people's compounds. That's a right that we once in a while we've seen being practiced here and there. Okay, so moving on to the next. Yes, we have the right to freedom from discrimination, right to freedom from discrimination, which again is something that I do not think that a lot of people know this, but contesting for a position should not be limited to your place of birth or your culture or your language. I mean, sometimes when things happen, it just shows. It goes to show where we are as a society, where we've sort of banked ourselves as a society. When people are complaining about Igbos and Yorubas and whatnot, and you're just like, wow, do we really understand what our rights are in this country, or we are still stuck in the past? You have the right to freely participate in an election, whether you are the one who is being voted for, the one who is voting, right? You should not be intimidated in any capacity. And the truth is that sometimes when you have these trainings and you talk about these things, it almost seems as if you're like an empty, a broken record, I would say, because when it comes to the practicability of it, you find that the executive arm or the people who are supposed to enforce these things, you don't know what's really going on. But I would say that knowledge is always on the positive side. It's always something that you should gain. And the more you gain it, the more you also spread the word. The more you understand it, the more you also share it. Share it amongst your friends, amongst your community. Let people understand that these things are your rights. Someone cannot come and tell you don't have a right to vote because you are not from this society. You don't speak whatever it is. It is your right to vote as a Nigerian citizen. You can vote wherever you are. It doesn't matter whether that is your place of birth or not. It is your right as a Nigerian citizen. you have a right to acquire an immovable property anywhere in Nigeria. You can buy land wherever, and build structures wherever, as in Nigeria, as long as you have also obeyed or you also abide by the Lands Act and all other sort of laws that govern the owning and acquiring of properties anywhere in Nigeria. Okay, and then we have the INEC regulation. So this is strictly based on voting and all of the elements of an election. So the INEC regulation sort of gives us a guideline on, when it is to vote, what it means to be a registered voter. It is a right of every Nigerian, every qualified citizen to register and vote during an election, and this right is protected by the Nigerian Constitution. It cannot be denied and should not be denied to any qualified citizen. And by qualified, I mean you have to be of the right age, you have to have the qualifications, whether it is to buy the form or it is to have a particular number of, you should maybe come from a particular political party. All of these things are what make you qualified to either register to run for office. You also have a right to recall an elected representative, right? So a voter, as because you are registered as a voter, you have a right. Your right does not stop at voting for an election. It doesn't stop at being voted for, voting at an election. You have a right as a voter to participate in a process called referendum or recalling of an elected legislator. Now, to recall means to summon back and withdraw the mandate that you have given to an a legislator through an election, right? So whether you were once elected as a senator or as the House of Assembly or representative candidate, you can be recalled by the registered voter, and that is why people would always hammer on, getting registered as a voter, registered to vote, right? Because your right is a lot more than just casting your vote on that day and you're making your vote count. You have a right far beyond that. You can recall, a lot of people do not know this, but there's a process to it. There is a whole majority or numbers that you have to report. Obviously, with more knowledge and more awareness, people get to know these things. You don't just vote people and then you just go to bed. You don't even care what's happening. You don't even care about the bills they're proposing or anything that they're doing. There's a lot that comes to it. Let us not forget that we have a right, as long as you are a voter, a card-carrying voter, you have the right beyond elections. You also have a right to secrecy when voting. People that come to ask you, who did you vote for? That's actually wrong. That's an infringement on your rights. And that is why, INEC provides that privacy store, when you are voting. It is actually your right to vote peacefully. And this is because in some countries, in some, people attack and assault voters, and it results in very bitter conflict, which should not be so. You also have a right to attend rallies, campaigns of political parties and candidates. You're free to participate in any of these programs when they come on. You also have a right to information about elections. So INEC rightfully should supply information about time, dates, procedure, venue, location. All of these things should be accessible to the public by right. So these are some of the things that you have access to as a Nigerian. So in conclusion, just before I take your questions, Nigerian Constitution, I would say that it properly outlines some fundamental human rights. And like our ED would always say, that if we really look into the Constitution as it is, it's not a perfect rule book. It's not perfect by many ramifications. But have we even tried to even implement it up to 30%? Because it's quite, it was painstakingly put together, and half of the things there are not even being upheld, are not even being implemented. If we could even do some of its provisions, we would actually go a long way. And it starts with, awareness, creating awareness, educating people, letting people know that this is actually available to you. This is what you have. This is what you should know as a Nigerian. So the problem is not really that the leaders do not know the law. Some of them, they actually use the fact that the citizens do not know the law and are not aware of the law. Because their leaders, they know the law. They know very well what it takes to get into office. They know court of act, they know the requirements, they know what it means to get there, because you have to follow the law in order to be elected and all of that. The problem now is then in implementation, and also us as citizens not being aware of what these rights are. And for any development to take place with the government, to always find a way to marry democracy, rule of law, and human rights. We would go very far as a country, as a society, if each of these things were, sort of elevated and were implemented by and large. So I'll just stop here for now. I've said quite a lot. I'm open for questions, comments, suggestions, if you would, on perhaps how we can do better as a nation when it comes to implementing our human rights, political rights as a nation. Thank you. Over to you, Ini.
Wow, thank you so much, Uchechi. This was awesome. Thank you very much. Very insightful class. And I'm sure that almost everyone, if not everyone in the class, agrees. Very insightful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll move straight ahead into the Q&A. Please raise your hand so that we can take your questions. If you are in a noisy place and are unable to unmute and ask your question, please type your question in the chat room. Okay, so it seems that this is one of those classes where we understand everything about the Constitution and our rights as citizens. So it's time to go home.
I'm happy. Everyone understands. That's good. Thank you.
I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. We are probably waiting to bell the cats. And Cynthia is the one who is belling the cats today.
Hello, everyone, again. Thank
Hello
you very
again,
much.
Cynthia.
Thank you very much for a wonderful lecture on our rights. I hope I'm audible. My question is basically on how much of a will is the Nigerian government willing to help us exercise these rights and protect these rights? And I'll take the civil and political rights as an example. We saw a lot of things happen during the last elections, where despite the awareness, despite the drive to exercise these rights were denied in various ways. Unfortunately, what I would say is the government is getting even more intelligent in suppressing the rights without outrightly doing that under the guise of a democratic government. And I can understand why the question yesterday was about being jaded about a hope in a Nigeria that, can keep to all the promises that it has made to citizens. So I'll talk about the voting, the right to vote. We saw a lot of examples where people were denied the right to vote, even in front of security operatives, even to the knowledge of the government, but nothing was done about it because the event was done, would I say, to the advantage of one particular group of people. And like we've said throughout this course, the judiciary is mum, or the judiciary is not stepping up to its own plate in protecting or helping us interpret these laws and protecting these rights. What is the hope for the common Nigerian, because we know these things. We are, going forward to actually exercise these rights, but we are getting suppressed continuously, day after day, and event after event. Thank you.
Okay. A very good question, Cynthia, and very articulately presented. So I'll just answer that question by narrating a bit of conversation I had with ED, Mr. Kunle Lawal, yesterday. So he mentioned something yesterday, which I quite agree with. A lot of times, and recent times, right, we felt like we've sort of progressed in where we are as a nation in terms of awareness, and rightfully so, to the credit of the youth especially. But at the same time, with what has happened with the past election, we can clearly state that there's still a long way to go. Our issues largely, we still have a very straight line focus, a very tunnel vision when it comes to what politics is and what elections are and what governance is. A lot of times we still think it's about who the president is, who the governor is. We're still very limited to those things. But the truth is that the president and the governor of a state still needs key people within the legislative, the House of Assembly. If I ask now, who are the people occupying your national or your state houses of assembly, or who are your representatives, in the Senate and in the House of Reps? A lot of us probably do not know. But these are the people that are making the laws. These are the people that are stifling our, amendments requests. These are the people that are passing laws that probably, going to affect us negatively. It is not the president or the governor. The president just sort of ratifies, and will also be doing that based on the advice that is given to him by the same legislative and the same House of Assembly. So granted, there was a lot of activity going on, but you could see that we were still very, for lack of a better word, myopic, right? Like local governments, elections, still very underwhelming when it comes to participation. And a lot of times people just go by the hype of what's going on. Oh, this is the reigning person. Let's all put our support behind them. Granted, there's a lot of voter stifling, there's a lot of intimidation, there's a lot of that. But I'm just saying that even within ourselves, even amongst ourselves, there's still a lot of work to be done. There's still a lot of work to be done in terms of even banding together, agreeing, even within our conversations. You can tell that there are still people that are still biased for very weird reasons, because this person is not Yoruba, because this person is not Igbo. And these are educated people. These are people that probably even studied abroad, people that are supposed to be, aware, whatever. And these are the people that will probably be quiet, when these things are brought to book. These are the people that have been elected as House of Assembly members. When it finally comes to their table, they turn another eye, because obviously they support such movement. I'm not saying that your point is not valid. It is very valid, but I'm saying that we need to start at the grassroots and to build this sort of system of government that we want to see, not start at the top, attack at the top, because it doesn't matter who you place, because the person who whispers or who drafts the rule book detects what costs that the country goes. The person who is in charge of the executive dictates what the police does. The person who is in charge of the judiciary dictates what the cost of justice is. So these are things, like you rightfully said, Cynthia, these are things that the ruling party is very aware of. They know where the power lies, where the power truly lies. They know this very much so. And that is why when these other elections are done, may not even hear about it. You find very little participation. But those are the people that they are sort of like the neck of, you just see the face, you see president at the field, but the person who turns the neck is this other, I guess, little roles, but they play very key roles. They play very, very key roles, because they are the ones who are closer to the masses. They're the ones who are closer to the people who cast their votes. But then again, we do have a problem as a society. But the things that are in our powers to change, I think we should also focus on as well. That's also a long response, but yeah. Thanks, Cynthia. That was a very good question.
Yes, thank you very much. Victor, please ask your question.
All right, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and many thanks for the very articulate presentation. I just want to ask very quickly that what can we do as citizens in the face of shrinking civic spaces? You agree with me that in the recent past, there's been a lot of suppression of voices, whereby citizens cannot utilize their rights of freedom of expression. I was going through the Cybercrime Act of 2015, and I saw a lot of gaps there that a government can latch on to undermine voices. So, and sincerely, somebody once said that if you want to really punish a black man, put it in black and white. So I was so surprised that this law has been in existence since 2015, and any government can just take it up, and in fact, even post on Twitter or do anything, you're already in trouble. So these are serious issues that a government can really leverage on to suppress voices. So what can we do practically to ensure that this is addressed clearly? I mean, there are a lot of anxiety about the incoming government, about their tendency to suppress voices. And from what we saw in post-election, that's our reality now. We have a new government coming on board. So how can we as citizens proactively ensure that this is well addressed? Thank you.
Victor, that's a very, very important question that you've asked. And I'd like to say three things regarding your question. One, political participation and your political rights do not start during elections. Your political rights and obligation and responsibility as a citizen, it starts long. It also does not stop after the election. It does not stop after the election. You've asked, about the Crime Act and all of that. You can look into lobbying for or get a conversation around amending that law, right? You can pushing amendments, text, bills around that law, and that would also be very, very proactive and efficient if you sort of traction in the person that you elected as the legislator for your representative. The person you have elected, if that person is wise enough to see reason why these things, and that's why I said that it's not just about the president or the state governor. The person who you've elected as a legislator would also be the ones to champion these changes, because the thing is, it is a human being that drafted that law. So why can't a human being also affect the amendment of that law, right? Now, you said there's some, fear around the incumbent governor or the incoming president. I would say this, as a citizen and as a law-abiding citizen, I wouldn't so much focus on what the fears are, but how can I play my part within this government? I would get to know who the legislators are. I would get to know who the people are they're electing into offices are, know about them, know who is connected to them in one way or the other. If I want to play my part, sort of position myself in places where I may not have an influence, but I may know who has an influence. If you know a lawyer or someone who is good with drafting bills, start having those conversations. Oh, this part of the law, there's something wrong with it. Can we look into, because it's not just the president that is ruling the nation. The legislators are also ruling the nation. The judiciary is also ruling the nation. The local government chairman is also ruling the nation. So again, your participation does not stop and end at elections. Fine, the election may not have favored you, but you are an opposition. You are an opposition, and your opposition does not stop during election. You still have a voice. You still have freedom of expression. You can still criticize. And while criticizing, you should also offer solutions. It might be a long road, but all these governments and all these systems of government that we admire, they did not start beautifully and colorfully. They came through a journey to get to where they are. Even not being perfect, we can learn from them and take things from them. But I would say that your participation as a citizen does not stop and end at election. That month of election, there's so much noise and then it dies down. It starts in fact, it starts now. It starts now when the person is being sworn in. You start to shine light on their actions. What has he said he was going to do? Has he done it? What were the timelines, right? And if he doesn't do it, you start the debate. Have dialogues. Nowadays, social media gets their attention. Nowadays, they are all on social media. They are now on social media, so it can even easily be heard, So I would say be a worthy opposition. Be a worthy opposition. That would be my suggestions. Be a worthy opposition. Let them feel that, yes, the people who, voted me in, the heat is on, and I'm not just here to sleep. It's not business as usual, because now the expectation is high and I'm going to be called to book. Even if the government or whoever it is they voted or they placed into offices, they are not calling them out. Let the international eye, be on them. Let's all expose ourselves. But yeah, Victor, our participation continues way beyond election. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam. In the absence of further questions, would like to call it a day. But of course, if you have any concluding words, you may go ahead. Do you have concluding words?
Oh, to me, no, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be with the Electoral College family. And I will also encourage everyone here, for what is whatever you're learning, trust me that you definitely find it very useful. There's a lot of free knowledge that's going around here, so don't take it for granted. They're very seasoned, and people here are doing a wonderful work. Thank you, Lisa, Amy, Maureen, and everyone here present. I really appreciate and I'm honored to be here. Thank you once again. Good night.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Madam. Thank you. I really enjoyed today's class and I'm sure that others did too. Guys, let me see your comments. Let's see in your comments, how was the class? How was the Q&A? What's your experience? You can even share your takeaways quickly in the chats. Thank you, everyone. Farid asked a question yesterday, which ED had said we should answer on his behalf. My internet started acting up. So I'll just quickly, I know he answered part of it, but I'll give my own perspective to that question. Farid, are you here? Let me just see your hand so that I know. Okay, I can see you. I can see in the chat. Sorry, in the was why is he doing this? Learn about Nigeria. The more, for some, in his own words, it seems like there's almost no hope. With the more he learns, it's almost like there's no hope for Nigeria, because where does one start from? My perspective to that is, it's, think about it. Somebody like Martin Luther King, at the time when he was really campaigning and doing all of that activism for, should I call it, the freedom of the Blacks in the United States, there was no hope. There was no clear, vision of change. right? They were simply agitating, but it wasn't as if you consider it similar to now. And perhaps it was even worse there because these people were even in a state of oppression. So it's, it must have seemed hopeless, but it's important to have a clear vision of where you want to go, which is something that ED has. It has a very clear vision. But I also say that one thing that probably drives ED is the fact that no matter how small that progress you think may be, the fact that you are in this class is proof that he's doing something right. So the fact that you are here, the fact that you are learning, the fact that you are participating, the fact that you show up every weekend, and the belief and the trust is that as we educate, as the Electoral College Nigeria educates you, that you are going into Nigeria in your different parts of Nigeria, and that you are effecting the necessary changes. So you're not just here to say, oh, I have you knowledge to liberate Nigerians. Now imagine that we have 5,000 of us among the two, kind of massive impact that would create. Now imagine that you have only even 200 of ED in Nigeria, and that 200, you could be among the 200. And so when you talk about what is the driving force, you also consider, yeah, you are part of that driving force. The fact that you showed up, that you registered for this session, and that you joined, it bolsters, courage, it bolsters hope. It says, we are doing something right, we can really make this change. Now, where it would seem hopeless for EDs if after all of this, you you go home and then you forget about it. I'm sure that for this cohort, business as usual. And on that note, would like to say thank you very much to everyone who showed up this evening. We appreciate your presence. We appreciate your wonderful weekend.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Chechi. Thank you so much. Well done, Ini. Thank you, everyone, for joining. See